Hi, everybody. Welcome to Red Wine and Blues program tonight. We are so thrilled to have Jessie Hill, who is an absolute champion for reproductive rights in Ohio. And I'm not going to steal her thunder, but I'm Missy McGinnis. I'm with Red Wine and Blue in Ohio, and I'm going to turn over to Katie Paris, who is Red Wine and Blue's founder and CEO.
Hey, everybody, and welcome, Jessie. Thank you for being here with us, Missy, and all of Team Ohio for organizing tonight, moving fast, building momentum to get reproductive freedom on the ballot this November in Ohio. Tell everyone, spread the word, good things can happen in Ohio. We're going to make it here. We're going to, surprise the world, surprise all those pundits in DC where I used to live. We're going to show them that very good things can happen here, but it's really all in our hands. And Jessie is one of just the fierce leaders for us in the state. So thrilled to have her. So as many of you may know, I started Red Wine and Blue just a few years ago to channel the power of suburban women, to help us mobilize one another, to organize together. And if there was ever a moment such as now, I'm so thrilled to have this moment to organize with all of you all. Gathering petition signatures, it's so concrete. It's so concrete all across the state. We are going to be able to be working together from now to July to gather thousands of signatures to make sure that we all can vote for reproductive freedom, to get it in the Ohio Constitution this November. And it looks like we're going to be the only state with reproductive freedom on the ballot if we can meet the signature threshold, and I know we can, but the only state in the whole nation with reproductive freedom on our ballot this November. So what a huge opportunity, again, to show the world what Ohio can do. So thrilled tonight to have Jessie Hill with us. Hey, Jessie's a suburban mom. She's just like us, except for not exactly. She is a total legal badass. She is the woman that we have to thank. I know there's many hands in this work, but Jessie is really the reason she fought in court to fight the 6-week abortion ban that came into place in Ohio immediately when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Because she took it to court, because she fought that fight alongside so many others. Today, Ohio's ban is at 22 weeks. You can access abortion rights in Ohio up to 22 weeks. Of course, that could go away at any moment with the whims of our state Supreme Court here in Ohio. So Jessie is diligently keeping watch and keeping us all informed. And Jessie is also one of the many great people who have been involved in crafting the ballot language that we all now get to collect the signatures for to enshrine not just abortion rights, but reproductive freedom. All of our reproductive rights will be protected in the Ohio Constitution if we can get this done. So Jessie's been busy, like I said, just a mom, but we're all superheroes in our own way, but Jessie is the superhero with us tonight. So with that, Jessie, can you tell us, you've got daughters, tell us, what this being in this and being right at the center of this fight means to you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Katie, I am also a suburban mom. I live in Richfield, a suburb of Cleveland. And I have 2 daughters. They are 17 and 15 years old. So, and they knew about Roe v. Wade being overruled when it happened. Really were old enough to understand what that meant for them and for their friends. And it's personal among many other things. It's all kinds of things for me. It's professional life, but it's also my personal life. This is where I live. This is actually where I grew up in Cincinnati. And so Ohio is my state. I take all of this so personally. So yeah, but I will say, and you were talking, Katie, about the sort of concreteness of this moment and being able to do something. And I think that that's what's really a gift right now, is just being able to do something, right? Having something that we can do to kind of take back our power in this moment. And so it's, at the same time that it has just been just like a harrowing, horrible, however many months it's been now, 9 months since the Dobbs decision. It's also, a good moment in some ways right now, I think.
I love it when we have something to do, and we certainly do right in front of us. So Jessie, we women like to, sometimes we actually doubt, like, do I have the chops to be a leader on this complicated issue? I just want to remind all of us here tonight that yes, you absolutely do, because FYI, you're a woman. Many of you are moms. Therefore, you are more than qualified to be weighing in on this issue. But we also like to know some of the details. So Jessie, you've been right at the forefront of this. Can you kind of bring us up to speed since about 9 months ago, last summer, Dobbs decision, Roe v. Wade is overturned, kind of what's gone down in Ohio since, and just focusing on kind of where we are today, what we need to know.
I still have some small PTSD every time I think back to June 24th, 2022, when the Dobbs decision came down. I mean, we all knew it was coming, right? And the opinion had been leaked about a month, and a half before. And and especially as a lawyer who represents abortion providers and I've been working in this space sort of challenging abortion restrictions in Ohio for a long time. This was something we knew was coming, but we also thought we would have more time. We didn't expect things to happen as quickly as they did in Ohio. And just, I still remember the day that Dobbs came down, and then the court, which normally had been really slow, where the 6-week ban was kind of tied up in litigation, let that law go into effect, and calling clients that night and just saying I'm so sorry, you have to cancel anyone on your schedule after 6 weeks. You have to call client patients tonight and tell them. And just the horrible stories of people just sobbing, saying they were going to drink bleach, just horrible stories. So that law was in effect for about 11-12 weeks, banning abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is so early, right? Most people don't even know that they're pregnant by then. And then after some, I'll say, initial unsuccessful legal maneuvers, we were able to go into court, trial court in Hamilton County in Cincinnati, and get a court to block that law from going into effect. The judge ruled, as we asked him to, that the Ohio Constitution, separately from the US Constitution, protects a right to end a pregnancy under its own, provisions that are separate from the US Constitution's provisions. And so the judge did that. That happened back in September, mid-September. Since then, the law has been blocked. So as you mentioned, abortion is legal in Ohio up until 22 weeks of pregnancy, and available until then in Ohio. But things are still really precarious. So the state has been appealing aggressively. And right now, the case is actually sitting in front of the Ohio Supreme Court. The state of Ohio has asked the Ohio Supreme Court to hear this case about whether the 6-week ban is constitutional under Ohio's Constitution. So that's bad news from our perspective, because the Ohio Supreme Court is a majority of judges who are very hostile to abortion rights. Kind of got worse after the last election, unfortunately. So we just actually heard today, you all are here for breaking news on the Ohio Supreme Court, that the Ohio Supreme Court is going to hear the case, but they're actually not going to decide this central issue in the case about whether the Ohio Constitution protects the right to abortion or not. But they are going to take some other really important issues in the case, and what they do here really still matters. And so that's all a long way of saying, we lost abortion access almost entirely. We got it back, and now it's super precarious and could go away again at any time.
Thus making this ballot initiative super important and the only way to really ensure access. So right. Jessie, can you pull back the curtain a little bit and tell us more about what your role was personally in blocking the 6-week ban, which really means no access. Most people don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. And that was a pretty huge deal. And I think something that wasn't necessarily expected by people who weren't watching as closely as you were. So what role did you play in that? How did it go down?
It's a huge legal team. And it's not I just sat at home and wrote the papers and then went into court and like won this argument, right? So, I mean, I've been representing independent abortion providers, meaning like clinics that are not like part of Planned Parenthood or some bigger organization in Ohio for a number of years, but I collaborated with attorneys from Planned Parenthood, from the ACLU, both like Ohio and national offices. And we actually, I will tell you, even before this, we have been kind of planning for this day for like probably 2 years before the Dobbs decision. We kind of saw it coming, and we'd been doing research and figuring out a strategy for arguing that the Ohio Constitution protects a right to abortion, even if the federal Constitution doesn't. So so we put together these papers as quickly as we could. We had to go into court in Hamilton County, and the first thing you do is ask the judge for kind of an emergency order. And one of the reasons why it was a genuine emergency was one of the clinics in the southwest part of the state that has been providing safe abortion care since Roe v. Wade, like almost 50 years, was about to close because of this law. And because of that, we ran into court, asked the judge to block the law. He set a hearing very quickly. I argued at that hearing, and we ultimately got our what's called a temporary restraining order. And then the judge set almost like another hearing, but it was almost like a mini trial for a few weeks later. And that was really crazy and then we were working with a law firm at that point as well, because there was so much to do. We had like 2 weeks to basically prepare like a whole day-long trial. And we did that. And that was held again in Cincinnati on October 7th. And again, it was one of these moments that was seared in my memory, because at the end of it, the judge, we didn't expect him to do this. We expected him to say, okay, thank you. I'm going to take this under advisement and I'll write an opinion and you will find out soon what we're going to do. And instead he said, I'm going to rule from the bench. I'm going to block this law again. I find that it's unconstitutional for like all of these reasons. And we were so thrilled and like hugging each other. And I remember I turned around and saw one of the clients who was an abortion provider in Cincinnati, who had been really brave and testifying in court, and she was just sobbing like tears of joy when the judge ruled. And it was a really amazing moment. So yeah, it was great to be a part of it. And just really exciting.
It sounds like a really incredible moment. I know we have a lot more of those ahead. Can you explain we had a question in the chat, and I think a lot of people just kind of want to know like how to explain in plain language to people who ask, like, why is it that the court did rule in our favor on this 6-week ban? Because, again, sometimes people feel like, wait, something went our way? How did that even happen? And just, is there a straightforward way to explain that to our friends?
When you bring a lawsuit, like you often don't just rely on like one argument. You want to put kind of everything in it that you can. So as many arguments as you can make. And so that's what we did. And so we had a couple of arguments. I mean, so one of the things is like, again, as I said, Ohio has its own constitution, right? That's what we're seeking, like, to add an amendment to with this ballot initiative, and it's separate from the U.S. Constitution. So, like, it has some similar language. And so, like, in the U.S. Constitution, it was like the 14th Amendment. It protects liberty. That's where the right to privacy was found under Roe v. Wade. We have a very similar provision in our Constitution, but judges can interpret it differently. And they can say, we think the Supreme Court was just wrong in Dobbs, and we think our language means that there is a right to end a pregnancy. And we had some good cases that we could point to in Ohio that suggested that that was true. So that was one of the arguments we made. Similarly, we argued that, like, Ohio's protections for sex equality, for gender equality, protects a right to abortion, which is an argument a lot of people have made. The U.S. Supreme Court has never really liked it, but it makes a lot of sense. And then we also had an argument, and this one I really love, because we have a provision in our Constitution that is not in the federal Constitution. There's nothing like it in the U.S. Constitution, and it's called the Ohio Healthcare Freedom Amendment. And it's written in really broad terms. And it basically says that Ohioans have a constitutional right to purchase or sell healthcare, and that no law can forbid or penalize or coerce the sale or purchase of healthcare. We pointed to that amendment and said, like, if you are somebody who's like looks at the text of the Constitution, I don't see a clearer text than one that says you cannot forbid the sale of healthcare. The reason I love this is because it was put on the ballot by a super libertarian group in 2011 as an anti-Affordable Care Act law. So it was meant to resist Obamacare, basically, but it has become, well, I mean, the language says what it says, and I don't think the people who voted for it knew that that's what it was supposed to do. They looked at it and they said, yeah, like, I want to be in charge of my own healthcare. And so we relied on that, and the judge agreed that that language was pretty clear, and that it obviously abortion is healthcare.
That's incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Ohio healthcare freedom. Let's all be for it. Yes. Okay. So, and I want to bring Missy, you've got some very timely questions as well. I want to bring you up here. I think that, let me just cover this one. I think that one question we get a lot is that, so Roe was the law of the land for 50 years. However, that did not prevent a lot of measures from certainly limiting access to abortion rights, to reproductive freedom in Ohio. So how would this be different? How is enshrining reproductive rights in the Ohio state constitution different? But let's also be real, in what ways does it still leave access vulnerable?
Let me start out by saying, like, the good part. I mean, I think, we were able to craft language that is, we think, very clear and very protective of abortion rights. Like, when Roe v. Wade came down out of the US Supreme Court, the court was not really, the court, like I said, was relying on language in the US Constitution that protects liberty. The court was able to kind of infer a right to privacy, which includes a right to abortion. This amendment says very clearly there's a right to reproductive freedom, which includes all these things: contraception, decision about continuing your own pregnancy, as well as abortion. And it makes it very clear that abortion is protected. And then it lays out a legal standard that is very demanding. If the state wants to regulate abortion, it can only do that in order to basically, if it has evidence that its law is going to advance patient health and safety. And that's like, it's a very strict standard, and it's very explicit. I mean, and I will also say, so that's one thing. I mean, I think that makes it different. Another thing is that, as long as Roe v. Wade was the law of the land, I will say that absolutely, states chipped away at abortion access and found ways, but, they didn't uphold, like, they never were able to get away with actually banning abortion. And that was because, until Dobbs, and that was because the law was very clear on that one thing. And courts knew they didn't have wiggle room. They looked at it. I mean, they would write opinions. Conservative judges would write opinions saying, I hate this. This is terrible. The Supreme Court should revisit this. And I have to follow the law. And the law is very clear here. So clarity takes us a long way. But you are right. All of this depends on judges doing the right thing and following the law. And in Ohio, as in many states, our judges are elected. And so they are subject to even more different pressures than at the federal level. And so, right. So on some level, I mean, it's like, you can't let your foot off the pedal, because even if we get this passed, we are still going to have to make sure, like, we hold officials accountable, and including judges, and make sure they really apply the law. And
what a massive opportunity for a civics lesson, right? For all of us to be teaching each other, our friends, our family, our children, about the importance of these, for example, nonpartisan judicial elections that change, one year in Ohio, they're partisan, their next, they're not. And I think everything you just said resonates so deeply with me in terms of, we have to be diligent, and it can feel exhausting, but there's one way to do it, and that's together. So that's why we're all here tonight.
I mean,
okay.
I'm a lawyer, and I don't think I even ever paid attention to the Ohio Supreme Court races until, pretty recently, right? Like, I mean, I would have to like go Google like who these judges are. And I mean, now I'm much more attuned, but yeah, I mean, I get it. And but it is really something that, right, like you
All
said.
right, for the record, everybody, even Jessie Hill was not paying attention to the state Supreme Court races. Missy, I want to kick it to you to bring us up to where we are and
Awesome.
what's happening
Thank
now.
you. Thank you. So I think a lot of people are on this call tonight because they know that there is a big movement afoot in Ohio to get this, to enshrine the constitutional right to reproductive rights and abortion access in the Constitution. And so you already talked about some big news that happened today with the Supreme Court, but some other big news happened yesterday, and maybe not everybody knows. So I was wondering if you could share what that news was and what that means for this effort to get this in the ballot this year.
Yes, it's been a heck of a week. So, so yesterday, Monday, the Ohio Ballot Board approved the language that we wrote to put on the ballot in November. So what that means, there are two hurdles basically that had to be cleared. The first one was that the Ohio Attorney General had to read the language and then read our summary that we wrote of the language. And he had to approve the summary by saying that it was a fair and accurate representation of our language. He wrote a nasty little letter where he said he doesn't like this amendment, but he has to do his job. He has one job to do. It's fair and accurate. And then he sends it to the ballot board. The ballot board is a partisan body. So we were a little bit worried. Their sole job was to look at the language that we wrote and say, is it one amendment or does it have like multiple subjects and things going on in it such that it needs to be broken down into more than one? We felt pretty confident it was only one, but like, you never know what people can come up with. However, the ballot board voted on Monday that it was only one amendment, which means we can go to the next step. And that next step is basically gathering signatures. I think there's some like bureaucratic paperwork that is in process, but basically we are ready to collect signatures on that amendment. So that means now it's time to collect a minimum of 413,488.
Hold that off your son.
Yeah. Yeah, which really means collecting like 700,000 or 800,000 if we can, because there's a really high rate of just issues with signatures, and they will be there checking every single one of them when they get turned in. So yeah, but that's like really exciting because now we have about 110 days or something. They all have to be collected by July 5th in order to have time to get them on the November ballot. And for the reasons we just talked about, abortion access in Ohio still hangs in the balance. The Ohio Supreme Court can still wreak havoc, and we could still lose access, sometime in the fall of this year. So there's a decent chance of it actually. So yeah, so that's where we are. But
well, it's such good news, and I think we at Red, Wine, and Blue have been working with the coalitions to do everything we can to get people mobilized to start gathering. So the Team Ohio is dropping links in the chat, and is definitely, for those of you who have not yet engaged with us, sorry, my dog is here just itching. Please sign up to volunteer and get ready to get out there and gather signatures. So can you, Jessie, share, I know you talked about the role that you co-wrote the ballot language, but can you talk a little bit about some of the polling that has been happening in Ohio around the ballot language? And like, I guess people really want to know is if I'm going to put all this effort in, is it going to be successful in Ohio? Like, will this pay off?
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually super optimistic because we have been working with a polling firm, like a national polling firm for quite some time. And actually even since like before Dobbs and even before the leaked opinion, again, those of us who sort of saw it coming because we are immersed in this area. And we were pleased to learn from early on that Ohio is definitely pro-choice. I mean, and Ohioans hate abortion bans. Like abortion bans are, significantly underwater in polls. Like 17, 20 points underwater. That was even before Dobbs that was the case. And so once we were working on the language, there was a lot of that, that was a whole process. But once we had pretty close to final language, we pulled a couple of different versions. Also, like there was a survey of 800 registered vote or 800 voters, and I don't know how they picked the people, but anyway, that's the national polling firm, right? But found that really there is a huge level of support for abortion rights and for enshrining abortion rights in the Constitution in Ohio. It's really somewhere in like the 60% range. We don't want to have to get 60%. That's another thing that's happening out there, that the Ohio legislature is trying to change the law so that we have to get 60%. We don't want to have to, because we know the other side is going to be out there like messaging anti-abortion, like crazy messages that that do sometimes filter through to voters and do sometimes convince folks. So the support can be affected somewhat by that, but I mean, just right off the bat, we found that somewhere upwards of 60% of Ohioans wanted an amendment like this, and very few, it's a tiny percentage that are absolutely opposed and want abortion to be illegal like it is now in almost all circumstances.
And just to clarify right now, if this, when we vote on this in November, it passes by a simple majority, right? And I know you alluded to this terrible initiative that's being led. Can you touch on that just in a little bit more detail of like that, underscoring the urgency as to this year on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the other thing that's going on is that the Ohio legislature is considering. So right now, if you want to amend the Constitution, you go through this whole process. It's a very big process, but as you can tell, but then once you get it on the ballot, it passes or doesn't by a simple majority, like any other law. The Ohio legislature wants to make it so that popular ballot initiatives to amend the Constitution need a 60% supermajority to pass. And that's, it's pretty unusual to reach that threshold in a state like Ohio, where people are, it's politically diverse. And, again, whenever there's a big ballot initiative campaign, there's going to be counter messaging and things like that. So, so they're trying to make it harder. And actually, there was a memo that leaked from one of the legislators behind this, who basically said it was because of abortion. It was abortion and gerrymandering that he was trying to stop people from taking action on, basically. And so the thing is, if that goes on the ballot in November, so that would have to go on the ballot too. Like, we'd have to have an opportunity to vote on that. But if that goes on in November and our amendment for reproductive freedom is on in November, then if they both pass, like, they can't apply that one to this one, like they, but if that passes in November and our amendment isn't on until next year, 2024, then it's going to apply to us and we're going to have to get 60%. And also it makes the signature gathering harder, and it does all these things. So it would be really bad if basically if that passes and we have to meet the requirements. So yeah, so that's another, like you said, Missy, it's another reason for the urgency around 2023, just in case, they do get this other measure going.
Right. And I know when we spoke a couple days ago, we talked about how gathering $800,000 gathering 800,000 signatures is a lot of is a heavy lift, but you said like this is doable. And I was hoping that you could touch on that and like what you've seen with other initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they managed to do it in Michigan. They actually, I mean, they did have the Dobbs decision come down while they were gathering signatures, so I'm sure that helped. But my understanding of having talked to folks again in this world, and some of this is new to me. This is like political ballot campaigns world. But having talked to folks, I think the average time from like getting certified to gathering the number of signatures you need is about like 110 days or so on past ballot initiatives. So this is like eminently doable. And that's like on stuff that people don't even care about as much as this, I think. So I really think with the energy and the folks we have in the room and, you know, and the energy across the state, we can really absolutely get it done in 100 and like, well, it's about 112 days, or I forget, somewhere in there, 110 to 115 days. Yeah.
Well, one last question for you before I turn it back over to Katie is the, you touched on what the ballot amendment covers, but I just was wondering if you could be kind of very clear with the people on the call today of what the language says in terms of what exactly is covered, because it's more than abortion. It's reproductive health.
That's right. So yeah, 113 days, by the way. Thanks, Jen, for putting that in the chat. Math, like not my strong point. Yes, so it creates a right to reproductive freedom. So that's the title of the amendment, is a right to reproductive freedom with protections for health and safety. So it starts out by saying that the Ohio Constitution protects the right to reproductive freedom, which includes a right to you know, contraception, to miscarriage management, because like terrifyingly enough, that has been an issue in Ohio when the 6-week ban was in place, to carry your own pregnancy to term, and also to make decisions about abortion. And then there are limits. There is a limit on abortion after viability. It can only be performed for health, basically for the health or life of the pregnant person. But it's left up to the physician's judgment to make that call on a case-by-case basis, because every pregnancy is different. And that's another really hard lesson folks have been learning on living under these abortion bans. So, and then, like I said, it also says that the state can regulate abortion, but it has to be doing so in the interest of furthering patient health and safety, and not for other reasons like religious reasons, morality, you know, ideology, things like that, or you know, other sort of trumped up reasons that often support this legislation. And it protects people who help people access any of these forms of reproductive health care as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's fantastic. So I just want to thank you for your time tonight. And I'm going to turn it back to Katie to do a final question and close the show.
Jessie, I want to thank you for just underlining that point about how thoroughly reproductive rights are covered in the language of this amendment. You know, just expect, don't guess. We don't need to guess what, you know, opponents of reproductive freedom are going to say about this. They're going to create some worst case scenario situations around abortion that aren't real and never happen. And they're going to say that that is what this constitutional amendment is going to try to do, when in fact, this will impact all of us in our healthcare. You know, I know I had to get a DNC for an early miscarriage at 10 weeks pregnant. I can only imagine how, if the 6-week ban had been in place, how that would have been like a conversation beyond just between my doctor, me, and my husband. So all of us and the people we love are impacted by this. And there is such a huge opportunity. Someone posted in the chat that this isn't a partisan issue. It is so not. We have such an enormous opportunity to bring the strong majority of Ohioans together around this deeply democratic issue that comes down to healthcare and freedom. So just thank you for emphasizing that. And I think we all need to do that throughout this. Lots of you are asking too, through different channels about, okay, I get it. Let's go. And so what we want to make sure everybody really knows here tonight, and Jen, I think, I know everybody's like posting about this in the chat too, but okay, all of us, like literally on the Team Red, White, and Blue, like our fingers are itching so bad to get our hands on these petitions. Team Ohio actually already has events for this coming weekend in the works. We've got to get our hands on the petitions. And I promise you, we are calling, we are texting, we are emailing like at every minute to move all the logistics forward so that we can get these into our hands and yours. So just like trust, you know, we are like that mom, like banging down the schoolhouse door over this issue, working on your behalf to get our hands on these as quickly as possible. And momentum is everything. So we want to build that with you, and we're going to get them into your hands as quickly as possible. The best thing you can do is sign up to be a volunteer. We're going to ask you some questions there to really designate like your interest, gauge like exactly what you want to do and how you want to be involved, because there's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of different jobs for all of us to take on here. And we are going to really make sure that you take on just exactly what you want and as much of it as you want. And if you do that, then we'll keep giving you more. And we understand everybody's busy and this is going to be a team effort. We're just going to do it together. So please make sure that you have filled out that form. Jessie, for your last question, we just want to hear from you, our fearless leader in so much of this. What is it in your mind that obviously we're all going to be out there collecting these signatures, but what do you want us to keep in mind over these next 113 days as ambassadors, as women of Ohio out there trying to get this done? What do you hope that we carry from tonight and forward as we do that work?
Wow, that's like a big question. I mean, I think, right, like I think one thing is, again, Ohioans really want this, like we deserve this. We want this again, right? Like we have huge support. It's not, as you said, it's not a partisan issue. There's no question, right? Like, and we've seen that in multiple states that it's not about party identification, and that, this is really, what this is really about is just taking back our power in so many ways, right? Like it's about taking our power to say, like, direct democracy, right? Like this is what we want our law to be. We're not content to let people tell us, what the law should be about, whether we have this right or not. And I think also it's about taking back our power over our own lives, right? And our own family decisions and our own healthcare. And so, that is just an incredibly popular message. I mean, people, again, like one of the things that we've seen time and again in all the polling and research we've done is like people feel really strongly that these decisions are personal, that it is none of the government's business, and whatever they might think about. I mean, even people who aren't particularly crazy about abortion themselves, or, think that they would never be in this situation, right? Still don't think the government should be telling people how to make these decisions. And I think that too is a really powerful message to kind of carry forward, is that it's none of the government's business. And that's really what this is about.
Yes, we have such a winning message and such an opportunity here. And I don't know about everyone else, but the idea of taking back my power with all of you sounds really good. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Perez, our Ohio program director for Red, White, and Blue, who is at the very tip of the spear, I promise you, like getting those petitions. So Jen, over to you.
So we wanted to save a little bit of time here at the end for any audience questions that maybe didn't get covered. I know throughout the conversation, I did have someone send me a private message, asking about if miscarriage was going to be called out separately before you all started talking about the wording. And so I think it's hopefully reassuring to that person, because they shared that they had a miscarriage, and I have shared my story as well. I had a miscarriage at 11 weeks and had to have a D&C, and it just haunts me to think that going through that emotional time in my life, I may have had to worry about, potential criminal charges, or, if Ohio copied what some other states are doing, like Texas, just dealing with that. So I did want to call that out. I think we covered it. But I know a lot of us have personal stories or know people who have personal stories. So, this really does impact all of us. There's a question, this one came from Amy. Do you think that passing this initiative will help remove barriers to abortion care, or will it still be difficult for our clinics in Ohio to operate?
That's a good question. I mean, there's there's an ideal world answer and then a real world answer. I mean, it is definitely designed, it is written to get rid of the sorts of barriers to care that are sometimes called trap laws, that are kind of, made up bureaucratic requirements that make it harder for abortion providers to operate without like having any real health or safety benefit or any real reason for, having that regulation in place. And so it is definitely written as a stronger basis for challenging those kinds of laws. And, we do think it will do that. But again, it's kind of like, there's also the practical answer that it kind of depends on what happens politically as well.
Yeah. So could be more to come on that.
This is, I know, going back to something we said, but I forgot to mention that also fertility care. I'm sorry, I was like listing off the areas that are protected. That's another thing that's been threatened by, extremist policies lately. So.
Yeah. And contraception. I think like there were some few comments in the chat, the wording of this amendment is very robust, right? And the team, you and the team who put that together, I know you looked at what worked in other states, and it's very robust language. Any prediction for what the opposition will focus on? So Jessie, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we know that they are, first of all, they're already starting with this tired garbage about abortion until birth. They keep saying, oh, this is, they want to legalize abortion until birth. Look, first of all, this is just not a thing that happens. Right. Second, the law explicitly, very clearly talks about a limit at viability, after which point, you need a medical health indication. But my own personal view is like, this is not compelling anymore. Like, we lived under a 6-week ban for almost 3 months. Like, we saw what that looked like. It was horrific. We saw all kinds, like people with cancer having to go out of state, like just horrible things. So I think it's people are going to be a little skeptical, but that's definitely one thing you're going to hear. And it's just not true. The amendment does not do that. I think the other thing we have heard is they are trying to say that this amendment says that young people don't have to get, like minors don't have to get parental permission. This amendment doesn't speak to that. It's not about that. But they're trying to say that it does that. I think that, again, I don't think the folks on the other side really care about parental choice. They certainly didn't care about like that 10-year-old's parents and them having to take, who was raped and had to go out of state to Indiana, right? But anyway, that is the other thing that we know that they're going to be saying. I think that's been the playbook in other states as well. And again, it's just tired and, the same old. So.
Yeah. And I think it was mentioned that Ohio is going to be the only state on the ballot this year. So we will see a lot of attention. And like you said, Jessie, like a lot of the same messaging coming from the opposition that they've tried in other states will be coming here as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a question here. Is 22 weeks considered viability? You want to talk a little bit about what the amendment says about viability?
Yeah, I think so. In some, so the amendment does say, it's the point at which the fetus could live like outside the womb. But it is a medical judgment. It's not like there's not a strict cutoff. So it does vary pregnancy to pregnancy. Physicians can like look at various factors to figure that out. Again, the situations, just to be clear, in which like an abortion is being contemplated at this stage, it's extremely rare. It's usually there's a serious indication either for the pregnant person or for the fetus. These are performed in hospitals. There's often like neonatologists around. So to be clear about that, but yeah, it's around there, but it's usually, but it's a case by case determination, which depends on a lot of factors like how like developed the fetus is, for example.
Yeah. So it's not a set number. It's
right.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question here asking about like the short common name, and maybe this came from when I mentioned Prop 3 in Michigan. I don't know, Jessie, if you want to comment on that. The comments here are saying, right to reproductive freedom. And we know that like the official amendment is called the right to reproductive freedom with protections for health and safety. I know that we won't have an issue number until after all the signatures are collected and validated to see if it actually will be on the ballot, but I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that part of why the with protections for health and safety is added on there is because people felt comforted by that. So as you are out there, like, and we, again, and we feel, and the Attorney General agrees that it's an accurate statement about what this is about, but, you know, as you're thinking about what to call it, I think reproductive freedom is obviously like shorthand and people like that, but, you know, some people felt more comforted by knowing that there were like protections built in for safety.
Question in regards to the amendment, how it's very specific in listing viability as determined by a physician or a provider. And my question to you is, how are our providers going to be protected if this constitutional amendment is passed in ways that, like, provisions for health, the individual's like health or life is supposed to be built into these anti-choice laws? But we hear time and time again how there are hospitals that are protecting their best interest and not the interest of their patient and their providers. And so they're advising physicians not to go through with particular types of care. And so I wonder if this viability gray area might open up issues for our providers.
It is a really good question. And it's something that I think is really important. So, but let me say, and actually it's interesting because like some of the survey data also suggested that this was kind of a concern for people who were encountering this language as well. Like, what does that mean? Our doctor's going to know what it means. The one thing I will say is that I think that they are, because this is what the law said before Dobbs, essentially, like in terms of this viability limit, at least, you know, with those unusual cases that, doctors have experience applying these kinds of rules. This is actually a little more expansive and a little more protective because it makes it very clear that is the physician's like reasonable professional judgment gets deference, and that like it doesn't have like weird terms that the Ohio law currently has. So I think it's a little clearer. It's written more in terms of medical judgment. So that's one thing. I mean, I think the other thing is that like in these rare instances, there are physicians who are a little bit more used to dealing with these situations and like have been operating under some sort of limitation for a long time. I don't know that it's the ideal world, but I think it's one that like they can live with, you know what I mean? But I guess the bigger answer is that this language is very like, you know, relies on medical judgment and looks to like reasonable medical judgment, which is something that, again, physicians are used to having to defend their medical judgment and you know, they know what's reasonable and not reasonable according to their professions generally. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jessie. It was an absolute pleasure to have you this evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks everyone for what you're doing and what you're going to be doing in the weeks and months ahead. It's, yeah, I think I have a lot of confidence seeing the crowd here tonight. So thank you a lot, very much.
I'm going to go ahead and just mention our call to action as well. So Katie kind of prefaced this, and I know there was some comments in the chat, but Red, Wine, and Blue is super excited to get out there, get these signatures collected. And we're going to need help from all of you across the state to make that happen. So the team has been dropping links, and I will have them drop again. We have a volunteer sign up form that you can fill out, and then we would reach out to you to talk about how you want to work with us. We are also have some events planned. We're doing twice weekly training. So those are on Monday nights and Fridays during lunch. So you can join us for a training session to learn how to collect signatures.
And anybody on the call, we want you all to be very involved in this effort. So please complete that form and you will hear from us very soon. Like this week, you will hear from us.